Alrighty, welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Scott Edwards. How's it going, Scott?
Oh, wow. I'm already on. Hey, everybody. It's Scott Edwards. Hey. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's so exciting. Unnecessary, but I'm happy to be here. How's it going, Jackson?
It's going great. Thank you for doing this. I know our schedules got all messed up, but good thing we got it going though.
Hey, two professionals, they always find a way, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, if people already can't tell, you are full of character and you do some comedy type stuff. So, I've had on a few comedians on my podcast before, and I learned something different every single time. So, I can't wait to figure out all the stuff that you have to say about it. So, I guess we're all kids and we all like to be funny, but how'd you get into comedy though?
Well, let me explain to you and your audience, and this is a very important thing. I'm a producer of comedy entertainment. I am not per se funny myself, although I can be known to do something every now and then. But but it is really about producing comedy. I opened a comedy club in August of 1980, and I got a chance to work with Jerry Seinfeld and George Wallace and Ray Romano, Gary Shandling, Bob Saget, you name it. I worked with all of them, and spent 41 years on the fringe of show business in the comedy industry. And to this day, I continue to produce comedy shows. And so I'm not quite funny myself, but I know a lot about stand-up comedy. In fact, I've written 2 books on the subject.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. I know a lot of the people who were in that Seinfeld era. They are still well respected to this day because their comedy is everlasting. Do you have some neat stories to tell about working with those kind of people?
Oh yeah, plenty. But you're absolutely right, Jackson. You hit the nail on the head. One of the things that makes somebody a long-lasting comedy star or celebrity is that ability to connect with the audience, to and I know that there's a few exceptions, but to be clean so that you can perform on any level or platform that comes up. For example, Ray Romano did a lot of great stand-up comedy, and then he got what I call the golden ticket after doing the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and that turned into the sitcom that everybody loves Raymond, and forever known for that show and that material. Jay Leno, of course, took his clean, always kind of mid-America thinking comedy, writing to the general public, being able to relate to the masses. Not only was a huge success on the Tonight Show, but ended up hosting the Tonight Show. It has done several TV appearances. It goes on and on. I'll give you one of the exceptions. Bob Saget, who was a terrific friend and helped me start my club, was known as is the really down to earth, clean, good father on Full House, and then later on Fuller House. But on stage, he was filthy as heck. He played guitar, he sang dirty limericks. Very funny comic. And when I'm talking about, I'm not talking about dirty like just a lot of F-bombs. We're just talking about material that was a little more risque, but always very funny and very relatable. Dave Coulier has a great way, and you remember Dave Coulier from Full House and Fuller House. He could combine being a little more risque on stage, but also work clean. And then he had the additional benefit that he could do voices. And a lot of people don't realize that on many of the cartoons you've heard over the years, Dave Coulier is one of the regular voice talents on those. So all these guys and many more have had terrific careers, but it comes to how best to relate to a large audience.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice that certain people will be way more successful when they're able to reach a broader range of people. You gotta have the ability to hit the audience in all phases. Just like that's why they call pop music pop music. It's because it's popular amongst everybody. It's not trying to fit in one lane. And Yeah, you've got to be able to do that to be successful and to continue growing in the industry.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Music, there's lots of niche music that has a niche audience, whether it's reggae or certain aspects of soul or blues or whatever. But when they get to the title of pop music, that means that it crosses all genres and that the largest, broadest audience. So for comedy, there's lots of comics that were had a niche way. You could talk about Bobcat Goldthwait, who was kind of high energy and a little crazy, or Emo Phillips, who's very esoteric and strange. Robin Williams, who was like a machine gun style and just throw out thousands of things. And then you have the straight monologist. They tend to get the broader audience. And we're talking about, again, Seinfeld. Ellen DeGeneres worked for me. And, she had a great way of relating to the entire audience. It wasn't any particular niche. She could relate to everybody.
Yeah, there are certain people who they've just got that skill. And do you think that it's something that people can work on? So let's say you started off doing something that's not like that. Do you think you can shift into that, or is it just take a certain kind of person?
No, it I think a successful stand-up comic, and that's a great question, is uh first off, they have to either want to be or have a natural ability to be funny. But if they're going to go pro or start getting in front of strangers and not just be the funniest guy in the classroom or at work or in the family, you have to be able to relate to just average strangers. And being able to do that is a bit of a gift, but also you can learn it. I've written two books on stand-up comedy. One's called Be a Stand-Up Comic or Just Look Like One. And the other that just came out last couple months ago, it's on Amazon. It's called 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic. And what I explain in these books is that I'm not teaching you how to be funny. I'm assuming that you have that interest and you have that gift to want to be funny. What I do as a producer and with my books is take that information and tell you what you need to do to make money at it, to go professional, and who knows, maybe get a sitcom. It all is about already having that nugget of talent and developing it into something. And I'm going to go a little longer, Jackson, and explain an analogy that there's a lot of people that know how to play guitar and electric guitar. I've picked up a bass guitar myself a few times. But what's the big difference between all of us that are sitting around our houses or backyards playing and the guys that we all know from the Stones and the Beatles and many more modern company bands? And the difference is the work effort and the drive and the ambition to be more than average. That's the same in comedy. You can be the funniest guy in the classroom, but if you want to be a pro and entertain a bunch of strangers and get paid for it, you got to work for it and really, like you said, develop your skills down a certain path. Now, that could be a niche, that could be generic. It could be dirty. It could be clean. It could be, there's comedy magic. There's comedy impressionist. There's comedy jugglers. There's comedy musicians. A lot of people don't know that Dana Carvey is a really good musician. And even though he played some songs like Choppin' Broccoli on Saturday Night Live and stuff, he started off as in a band with his brother and doing comedy just for fun. And then he got good at impressions and it just grew and grew. And now he's famous for being a comic actor.
Mm.
That's another thing. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on and on, but once you find your voice in comedy, there's so many things you can do, Jackson. You could be a comedy writer. You could be a comedy actor. You could be a straight stand-up comic. You could be a comic musician, comic magician, and go on and have a huge successful career that way.
Do you think there is a benefit to people who can do both? Do you think that that helps them get? I mean, are they getting a more niche audience, or do you think they're reaching a broader audience, being able to do they're a two act entertainer at that point.
Right, right. No, I think just like everything else in life, the more you can add to your portfolio of talent, the broader the audience. So, for example, you might have a successful stand-up comic, but he also knows how to do music. Well, he adds a few music songs, comedy songs at the end, and now he's expanded his act and he's getting more energy from the audience and doing more with it. There's a lot of magicians that are really terrific magicians, but when they add comedy, it makes them a broader audience appealing to a broader audience for because now he's doing comedy and magic.
It's like Penn and Teller.
Exactly. Those guys started off on the streets of San Francisco, the hardest kind of magic to perform. And by adding comedy and being professional and having that drive and ambition, they're now, world renowned.
Now, I guess this question is more of a production type question. So, you were talking about all these people who were single acts, but then you started talking about being able to do different things, and I started thinking about people who were like in groups. They were known for a group. So we had the Kings of Comedy with like Steve Harvey, D.L. Hughley, and Cedric the Entertainer. Um,
Yeah, there were the Dads Comedy Tour, which was four guys that got middle age, started having kids. They were already each professional comics of their own right, but they put together a basic show with a theme. Then you have Rob Becker's The Caveman series, which was a one-man show, but it was kind of a combination play and stand-up. And that's a whole nother way to read an audience. I worked recently with the talented Jewish comic. His name's well, I just had Peter Fogel, just had a brain fart. Peter Fogel, and he has written a terrific play / one-man show about being Jewish in marriage, and he's doing really well all over the country with it. So there's different vehicles that can take you to success. It's probably similar in sports. We always hear about the NBA stars, but there's a lot of guys that make it in college, or the Harlem Globetrotters, or the guys that, are street ball. I mean, there's different levels of every talent. And what's great about stand-up comedy is it can take you a lot of places. In fact, a quick side story, there was a guy that was working for me regular, and he was so funny, had terrific writing, but his performance was a little lackluster.
hmm.
And I pulled him aside and I said, his name was Ed. It is Ed Solomon. And I said, Ed, you got some of the best material I've ever heard, but maybe you should be selling it or go into writing because your performance was a little lacking. Well, that guy went on to write movie scripts, and he is the script writer for all the Men in Black series. He did Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He's done several big, he's a huge multimillionaire. But he went into writing because that's how he took his comedy to that next level.
Yeah, and sometimes it just takes somebody like you who just takes notice of what's really going on. Like famous Alabama's uh, football coach, he took a guy that came to the school as a wide receiver and told him, "I think you play cornerback. That's Trayvon Diggs. He's like
Oh, wow.
one of the best cornerbacks in
Right.
the NFL." So if it wasn't for that one person seeing that he would do better at a different spot, then he wouldn't be who he is today.
Well, I have nothing to do with Ed Solomon's success, but you're right that as a producer, I've seen a lot of people. When Paula Poundstone first came to work for me out of Boston, she really was not that good, and she was the only act in the history of my chain of comedy clubs I let work multiple weeks, because the secret to getting better is getting a lot of work. So I was letting her on stage week after week, night after night. And then while she was working for me, she met, some people out of the Bay Area, and she ended up working under Robin Williams and others. And they helped her hone. She already had a kind of unique, esoteric, funny side to her, but she was having trouble, getting the regular audience to engage with her and to understand where she was coming from. But she did, and she's been a huge success. But there's been a lot of great stories of people that persevered by working at their craft for over and over and getting better and better.
So it's 2022. TikTok is raging, and Instagram Reels are the thing. What do you think about this new age of comedy? Even YouTube, it's been around for a while, but the digital comedy versus, we had our old sitcoms and stand up. What do you think is the big differences between these?
Well, I'm older, and I got a chance to work during what I call the rock and roll wave of comedy. There was stand-up comedy in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but it was more of a entertainment break for between strippers and jazz bands, right? It was not a mainstream entertainment at the time. But in the late 70s and early 80s, it got recognized and came to the forefront. And I opened my club in 1980. So I was able to ride that wave. Well, what that did is before 1980, there was maybe a dozen or 20 stand-up comics in the whole country. Bill Cosby, different people that were out there entertaining, that cut their teeth in the jazz clubs and the strip clubs. And their way of reaching a broader audience was, if you can remember, albums, right? The big regular comedy albums. So then 1980 comes along and comedy explodes. And the good news was that a lot more people got into it. There was much more opportunity for success. A lot of celebrities and stars were created out of the 80s and 90s. If there was a downside, it was that every Tom, Dick, and Harry thought they could be a comic and would be the next Jay Leno overnight, right? And so you had to weed through a lot of the crap to get to the good stuff. So now fast forward to 2020, 2022, and everybody still thinks they're funny or wants to be funny, and that's fine. But what the internet has offered and social media has offered is that people that are funny and people that are not so funny all have access to the public. And so on social media and on YouTube, you have to go through a lot of different videos or a lot of different presentations to really find the gems, the funny ones. Remember, you're probably not too young, but you might remember when MTV first came out. We were all addicted to watching MTV, but we would sit there and watch video after video, and we go, well, the next one will be good, right?
Yeah,
Because there was a lot of bad music videos when MTV first started, because it was a new thing and everybody had a music video, maybe even if they shouldn't have.
yeah.
So it's kind of like that with comedy, is that the good news is that if there's somebody out there that's really funny and really has that drive to be a comedian or use their comedy and talents to write or be an actor or whatever they want to do, it is easier to reach people now than it was in the 80s, and way easier than it was in the 60s, right? So generationally, we're getting better at opening up and allowing access to the various art forms. The downside is both producers like myself and the public have to work through the crap to get to the diamonds.
Yeah. So my comparison of this is like, when you go to like an arcade or something and it's got like the basketball, you can shoot basketball hoops. That's like being really good at that and you can't miss, and thinking that you could go play in the NBA.
You're so fun. That is so true.
You're on TikTok and you're getting all these likes and everybody tells you how funny you are. That doesn't mean you're about to become a millionaire comedian.
Right. Trying it on stage and live in front of a live paying audience that paid money. That's the key. A lot of open micers that are performing for free on a free open mic night might get some laughs. But when someone's invested $20 to be entertained, right? And they're with their date or their spouse, and they have an investment in the evening, the expectations get higher, and that makes it harder. I've been very blessed to work with some of the best in the industry. Um, there was one of the guys that's a little before your time, but he's a famous Russian comic, Yakov Smirnov,
Hmm.
and he came over. He was a comic in Russia, but there's not a lot of comedy there. And the government controls every word you say, so there's no improv. And he was working cruise ships on the Black Sea, and he was very muted as a entertainer. So he came over to America. He didn't know how to speak English. His parents, it took him several years, but they were able to bring him over. And I was one of the first clubs he worked, and he actually had to learn English by watching TV,
Mm.
and used clubs like mine to get better at the language, better with timing, and better with the audience. He already had an act in Russia, but now he was transforming himself and his material to an audience here in America. And he went on to huge success. He's been in several movies, and he uh, was the help speech writing for Ronald Reagan and performed at the Correspondents' Dinner. And now he has a theater in Branson, Missouri, and has a PhD and still does comedy. So that's just an example of going through some real challenges and coming out on the right side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a big audience that you can m- like just grab from just doing like having a certain background or doing certain things. It's very impressive with today's industry, especially like what I was talking about earlier with the social media. Um, how do you think about like the different avenues that you can take? So like there's TV if you want to be in a TV show like a sitcom, or if you want to be in movies or do stand up. How are these things, I guess, similar, and what are the pros and cons to all these?
Well, that's difficult to answer, Jackson, because each of them has some real high ends and each of them still have a lot of drawbacks. The guys that are really gifted, as I mentioned, who I call the guys that got the golden ticket or gals, are the ones that can um, reach across and do different things. So an easy answer example would be Jay Leno or Jerry Seinfeld. Those are easy, Dana Carvey, but they're able to not only do well on stage. I mean, Jerry and Jay are still out performing on tour. They love the stage and doing live performances, and yet both were really good as guests on talk shows, which got them famous. And then both were able to either get a talk show in the case of Jay, or Jerry getting a sitcom, be able to become kind of actors and still have all those other attributes. But that's really difficult. And that's why there's only a few people that have done it, because that challenge of bringing your talent to all those different vehicles, presentations to the audience, is really hard. And you have to really want it. You have to be willing to work at it. And I trust you. A lot of people hear the term overnight success, but any professional you see making his way is really put in the work. I happen to play a lot of golf and watch golf. Um, and you watch these professional golfers and you go, man, I didn't hear about this guy 2 years ago, and he's about to win the Open. And you go, man, that's amazing. Well, what you don't think about, or unless you do think about it, he's probably started in high school, played, in college golf, and then went on to the different small tours that led to getting to the PGA, right? So my comedy club, it was called Laughs Unlimited. It's still open. I don't own it, but it's still open. Was kind of like university for comics. So they'd go out in some bar and practice on stage, and then they get some small comedy club, and that's like maybe high school or like college. But when they got to an A room, which is what I ran, an A room, that you're getting ready for the big time. You're getting ready for the pros. And I had a lot of them come through my club and become pros. And you asked about TV. I actually produced 3 TV series as well, Jackson. And I always loved doing television, with stand-up comedy, because you were able to showcase guys that weren't famous but still really really funny. You know, we know about the ones that are famous, the Bob Saget's, the Dave Couliers, but there's a lot of people, Steve Bruner and Milt Abel and Jeff Jenna and Tim Bedore, and I can go on, Rick Corso, that are not household names, but they're really funny, made good money, and had a lifelong career in comedy.
Yeah, I've always been curious about those supporting cast members that are just so funny. Like, gosh, the what's his name? Wilson, the neighbor in Home Improvement.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, I've never seen him and stuff after that show, but like, it's or before, I'm not really familiar with him, but he made the show. Like it was about, Tim, but he had the neighbor who was,
Very funny and added to the show.
only
And that's
showed his
really
nose up too.
and by the way, that's a good look for you. So careful, beer through the nose will hurt. So what the difference there is in acting, even though we haven't seen that character in a lot of other things, I happen to know for a fact that he has performed in a lot of other TV shows and movies. He just wasn't as prominent as he was in that one. And that's kind of it's a great analogy of what we were just talking about, Jackson, is there's a lot of comics that are really terrific and very funny and made a good career. They're out doing cruise ships, they're out doing big corporate shows, but the audience doesn't know them like they know a Seinfeld or a Carvey or somebody like that. Robin Williams, who is, not only a world famous stand-up comic, but a world famous actor. He actually studied at Juilliard acting school. He was acting from high school on. He was really into acting, and comedy just became a way for him to get known and famous. And he was amazing on stage. He worked my club twice, and we've all seen him, really high energy, machine gun kind of style, throwing out 10 things, hoping 8 were funny. But, when he was off stage, he was very down to earth, very quiet, almost shy,
Mhm.
because on stage it was an act. That's what I was trying to get to, that they're not always who they seem to be in real life that you see on stage, much like acting.
Mm. So also, I guess along this topic of people who aren't usually well known, how do you go about evaluating like people's talent? You're like, God, that person, they're not gonna make it, or oh, I think that person's gonna be a star.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, and I wish there was some way to bottle it. I'd be a millionaire. But I happen to have a good sense of humor and a good. After 40 years of dealing with comics on stage, I know what works and what doesn't work. And it's interesting that you mention it, Jackson, because just last Sunday, a week ago, a week and a day ago, I went to a local club called the Punchline, and it was kind of an open mic night. It was a class that had taken 4 weeks of comedy writing lessons, and then the finale was they performed on the stage at the Punchline, and I was invited as a guest, and it was the first time I've been in a club in a while. And right off the bat, there was probably 12 acts. There were 2 of them that I made a point of um, pulling them aside after the show and giving them my business card and said, "Hey, you've got something. Let me help you take it to the next level." And, I'm not going to charge them. It's not anything other than when I see somebody with talent, I want to support them and help them.
That's something that I truly believe we need more of in this planet is just people who just believe in people and who can evaluate talent and just be like, oh, I think that person could use some help, but I think that they're on to something because that's what's going to make, even no matter what your profession is, I think that helps people. Just having like a solid coach or, producer that backs them up.
Yeah, a lot of people think comedy is kind of a lone wolf industry. In general, it is, But just like with sports or acting or singers and rock bands, um, you don't just take that path yourself. You're going to be helped and supported by other people if you're smart and listen to other people. That doesn't mean you do everything everybody tells you, and you have to use your own filter and decide what works for you. But it is one of the reasons I write the comedy books. I have an online comedy course through my websites, scottscomedystuff.com, is a way to share the 4+ decades of information I have to help somebody else. I was telling you these two young men from last week. One was Raul Gonzo, and the other one was James Martin. And just remember those names, because in 5-10 years, they might be out there. I think they have the talent where people will know them. So who knows? I mean, they may not. They could crash and burn. Many have, but many have made it. So it is, that's a good point. It is a bit of a crapshoot too. We were talking about the people that are really funny and not famous, and then ones that are famous that got the golden ticket. It's kind of like the actress that's sitting in a diner on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, right? And somebody goes, "Oh, you'd be a star." Well, that happens, but really rarely.
Yeah. I mean,
Most people have to work their way, right?
and people probably think, oh, if I just, move to LA and be in these places, then somebody's going to find me and I'm going to blow up. But it's like the chances of that is you might as well try and catch a shooting star.
Exactly. And let's say somebody does spot you, you better have something, you could still be growing and learning, but you still need that nugget, that chunk of coal that's going to be turned into a diamond. You have to have somewhere to start.
And also, I would say probably just the recruiting in general for comedy, TV, whatever is probably enhanced because of, the internet nowadays.
And YouTube, you mentioned YouTube. I mean, COVID really taught us something that I don't know if you're a fan of America's Got Talent, but they have a whole segment even before COVID that was people that were sending in YouTube videos of themselves. And then COVID hit, and people, 80% of the people that showcased for the show were doing it via video. Right. And so, like you mentioned, if we didn't have what we have today in YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, a way to share our creative content, it really affords a large opportunity to more people.
What would you say is like one of the harder things to do in the industry? Would you say it's just being the main attraction, or is it more lines the work of what you do?
Well, well, the producer's job is probably a tad easier than the talents part, because even though there's challenges to being a producer, you have to not only find the talent, but then when you present it to an audience, you have to present it in the right way. For example, you don't want somebody going up on stage and doing a bunch of F-bombs and dirty comedy and then introduce somebody that's totally clean. It just makes it too hard to follow, right? And so a producer of a comedy show, a live comedy show or television, is kind of like a stage orchestra conductor, where you're trying to bring the music along and you build it and you build it and you reach that crescendo. Well, it's the same with stand-up comedy. You want to introduce something funny to the audience, but you have to build the laughter. You don't put your funniest guy up first, right? He goes up last, so that you build that audience up and you take them on a journey of comedy. And so the production side has some challenges. There's the audio, there's the lighting, staging, all that stuff. But stand-up comics are really, it's just them with the audience. And I don't want to say against the audience, it's with the audience. They have to go out, whether it's 10 people or 1,000 people in the audience, they have to get their attention, get them to turn off their cell phones, get them to listen and be interested in what you're talking about. And that's why the best comedy is stuff we can all relate to. Being in a relationship, driving a car, going on an airplane, going hiking, because everybody in the audience has done those things, right? And then hopefully as the comic, I'm finding my funny twist to that. And that's where you connect with the audience. I will say, and I don't want to step on any toes, but I think one of the challenges of today's comedy is this kind of wokeness or everybody's so easily offended thing. So what was great about the 80s and the 90s was people went to a comedy club, they knew it was comedy, right? So if you're picking on a guy in a funny sweater, everybody's in on it, even the guy with the goofy sweater, right? Nowadays, if you go on stage and you make fun of some guy in a sweater, there's somebody over here that's upset that, well, maybe that sweater was a gift from his mother. And somebody else going, some sheep died for that wool. And somebody else said, oh, the artisan that made that sweater, you're being mean to them. It's like, screw that. It's comedy, right? But it's difficult in today's audience to separate. It shouldn't be, but it is, to separate what is comedy and what anybody might be offended.
Absolutely. I think we saw that big time with Dave Chappelle and his.
Oh, right.
I mean, but what kills me is that Chappelle's been like that for forever.
Yeah, he hasn't changed. He was saying the same thing 5-10 years ago. And that's what's funny. And you brought up a good point. I think funny is funny. So my podcast, Stand-Up Comedy or Host and MC, is a podcast that celebrates stand-up comedy from the 80s and the 90s. And I think it stands today as it did then, because in my mind, funny is funny. The comedy hasn't changed, but what's changed is the audience. So people under 30 don't tend to like my podcast because they're offended or it's not the topics they can relate to or whatever. But the people over 30 are like, oh, I remember that, or and they're not easily offended. And that, you see my point. There's an audience for everything and everybody, but it has changed. The audience has changed. I think comedy, and Dave Chappelle's a great example. He's doing the same kind of humor he's been doing for the last couple of decades, but now it's offensive.
Yeah, I would hate for mainstream America to see an Eddie Murphy Raw or Richard Pryor.
Oh man, that's just the beginning, right? I mean, there's so many people that have had, that were Bob Saget, really edgy on stage, or Bobcat Goldthwait, that was really insulting on stage. Don Rickles. I mean, my God, this guy had a 60-year career in comedy, movies, and stage as a guy that all he did is pick on everybody. Mm-hmm. The thing was, it was harmless comedy. Can we all say that together? Comedy, right? It's not, if you take it personally, guess what? You shouldn't be there. Because the people that want to hear it and want to enjoy it understand that it's humor. It's not meant to hurt anybody. Don Rickles was one of the nicest guys off stage, but on stage he picked on everybody. And it was cool. It was funny.
Speaking of older acts that were successful, I was just thinking about just like how YouTube and I think younger people just try to do random stuff to be entertaining. So, how they, what's the phrase? Old things will be made new again. Somebody who I think...
it's all cyclical, right? It comes around.
Somebody who I think could actually, or not somebody, but a type of act that could actually might do well nowadays is somebody like Gallagher.
Yeah, no, you're right. Gallagher was very generic. No offense to Gallagher, but going out and smashing, watermelons with a mallet and doing prop comedy. He was a famous prop comic. There was another one who's a good friend of mine, Bruce Baum, came out as Bruce Babyman Baum because during one of his closing bits, he ends up in just diapers, and then he sings a rock song in his diapers. Hilarious stuff. But prop comedy, there isn't any really good prop comics out there, and it's not hard to do, and it's pretty generic. Like I said, there might still be somebody on the fringe that gets insulted because, maybe they love watermelons and you just smashed one. But you're right, there isn't any good prop comics out there. I guess the last one, and he's still working in Vegas, is Carrot Top.
Yeah.
Carrot Top is still doing it in Vegas, but he hasn't been on TV in years, and there isn't anybody. But that's a good call, Jackson. That's a great form of entertainment that everybody can relate to. Shouldn't insult anybody, and can be funny.
Yeah, and plus, like, just the way kids can
By the
see
way, I'm taking notes. I'm going to go start my stand-up act with props any minute now.
by by all means. Like, I think there's just something about just learning from our history, learning from what people used to do, and just bringing back. We see that all the time in music. I'm in the music industry, so
Yeah, the Romero records. I was wondering where that came from. Do you producing music?
yeah, I can make beats and also engineer vocals, and I rap, so I do it all.
Oh man, that's cool. I'm in the presence of greatness. That's great, Jackson. I actually produced a couple bands back when I had a jazz club for about 5 years, and I took a couple bands and took them to an album and got it out in Tower Records. Um, and it's a really difficult, challenging industry. But you're absolutely right that everything in life is cyclical. And, I think there'll be a good prop comic coming up. There'll be other good stand-up comics once the audience gets their finger out of their, um, and so, hopefully the pendulum has swung really far to the left. Let's hope it comes back a little bit more to center. And then we'll see a lot more opportunity for people to entertain, whether it's music, comedy, or acting, and not be so judged.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely room for all kinds of changes and new avenues for people to take. So I'm pretty interested on just how entertainment in general moves forward. I mean, we have seen, I'd say YouTube consumption is almost on par. Well, actually, it's probably way higher than TV actually, but it's something that we should definitely take heed of as as people consume their content differently.
Well, you're a musician, so I'm probably twice your age or more. But if I was a young, talented musician, I would be utilizing everything, all the tools you have in your toolbox, Jackson. You got the social media, you've got YouTube, you've got podcasting. There's other things, but you should be, sharing your music and sharing your ideas and sharing your beats and getting them out there so that there you will form, people will pick it up and realize your talents and take that journey with you. And then you never know, you might get the golden ticket where some big producer or some musician, famous musician, or some band, here's your beats or here's your style or here's your what you bring to the industry, and gives you that phone call. But what we were talking about is this was a much harder 20, 30 years ago, right? When they, before the internet and before all this. Now, if you have a gift like you have, there are opportunities to get out there, and I recommend you do. You got to self promote, have faith in yourself. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started over 12 companies. I've been bankrupt twice. I've been kind of rich a couple times, but I always banked on myself. I was willing to gamble on myself that I could take my idea, my talent, and turn it into something. And I would tell all your listeners and you as an artist, believe in yourself, take the chance, because what's the worst that can happen? You fail. If you fail, you just get up and try again, right? Failures are the stepping stones to success. If you're not failing, you're not trying. So get out there and share your content. You never know what oyster you might open.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that I have to get on. That's something that lets me know I think I'm going to be more successful in music than my peers, is because I love sharing my, like, what I've been doing. Like, I love actually putting my music out there. I'll work with people and they'll talk about doing stuff, and then they just never put it out. And I'm just like,
Oh, yeah.
what are you doing? Like, how are people supposed to like you if they don't even know you? They don't even know what you're doing.
Right, right, right. I can't tell you. I've mentored a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's a famous Disney quote. Walt Disney once said, "Stop talking about it and start doing it, because whether it's good or bad, if you don't do anything with it, you'll never know." And a lot of entrepreneurs go, "Oh, I want to open this amazing restaurant, or I have an idea for a brick and mortar store that's interested in what I'm interested in." And they talk about it for years and nothing ever happens. I go, well, what happened to your idea of opening a restaurant? Oh, well, then they have this excuse and that excuse. You know, I opened many of my businesses with no money. Money cannot be an excuse. There's ways around everything. You can negotiate almost anything today. So money's not an excuse. There's your time. Well, if it's something that you believe in and you're going to bet and invest in yourself, you have to make the time, right? It's kind of like the person that has a 9 to 5 job but goes to night school to get their PhD. Good for them. They're utilizing their personal time to advance their career.
Yeah, I actually am a big advocate for people to not make that excuse of time, because I actually work as an automation technician for Owens Corning, where I like do engineering for like robots and stuff like that. So
That's cool.
that's my day job from 7 to 3. When I get home, I am working on like photos and videos and stuff like that. And I'm also in Full Sail University for my bachelor's degree in music business. So,
Oh, awesome. Oh, wait. I have it. That's awesome. That's great. Congratulations, Jackson.
so when people tell me like, "Oh, I can't do this because I don't have any time," I'm like, "Hold on."
Yeah, no. If you want it, man, you can find the time. It's all about controlling your own environment. And I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of people that have that. I'm considered an A personality. I take charge of any room I'm in, and come hell or high water, I'm going to achieve what I'm trying to achieve. Now, I might step on some toes, or I might totally fail, but if I don't try, I didn't know, right? So I recommend to anybody listening that if you have a dream, don't talk about it, do it.
So, with you talking about doing all your businesses and everything, what are some things that you find difficult about being a entrepreneur and trying to prevail an idea?
Well, there are always challenges. It's just a matter of overcoming them. So money is always a challenge. You have to find creative ways to overcome that. Marketing and branding is much easier than it used to be. Back when I was opening some of my early companies, nobody could afford TV. So it was all print newspapers, which aren't around anymore, and radio, which isn't doing very well. And a lot of what I called, kind of community marketing, my own type of getting out and hitting the streets and shaking hands and pressing flesh, that kind of marketing. But if there's a problem, there's a solution, and you just have to be creative and think it through. And it's not going to happen always right away, and it's not always going to be easy, but it is out there. So I started my first company. It was a small construction company. I was a night maintenance janitor in a cheap motel. So I was, cleaning toilets, fixing electronics, and buffing and waxing floors, right? Every night, all night. And I was in the bar and I overheard a couple guys talking about making money on the weekends. I should mention I was 17 at the time, and I was hiding in the bar and overheard these two guys talking about making money painting lines in a parking lot. It's called striping. And I go, well, I could do that, but I didn't have any money and I had this crappy job. But I did all the research. I went and talked to people that are already doing it. And here's career clue number 2. talk to people that are doing what you want to do. They're out there and they love to talk about their own successes. So I went around to other striping companies and asked them how they got started, how much they charge, what were the hard and bad things like in the striping business, where do you get your paint? And so I learned, I asked questions, and I garnered a bunch of information, but I still didn't have any money. So I had a good high school buddy that just came into an inheritance of $500. And we used that to buy a paint machine, a striping machine. And we go, great, we got the paint, we got the striping machine, we built this company. Wait a minute, how are we going to get to the job sites? Hey, we have another buddy that's got a van that he's not doing anything. So we made him a partner. So his van, the other guy's machine, I was the sales guy, and we ended up painting the stripes of every parking lot for McDonald's in Northern California, all the Safeways in Northern California. We did an airport, we did lots of private companies, and it was a huge success. And I stayed in it for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then sold out. And what's interesting, Jackson, that company is still running today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was 50 something years ago. So, you know, I had a dream, I had an idea. There's something that would get me out of cleaning toilets into owning my own business. And I just had to be creative and find partners and talk to people to be able to do it. When I opened my comedy club in 1980, I was selling life insurance and absolutely hated it. I was 23 years old. And, when you're 23, you don't ever think you're going to die, right? So I was in LA with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife, and went to a comedy club called the Comedy Store in Westwood. It was a satellite club. And I saw Sandra Bernhardt and Dave Coulier and George Wallace and a few others. And I go, man, this is amazing entertainment. But I didn't know what I was going to do. So all the way driving back from LA back to Sacramento, I'm going through my mind what I needed. I needed a location. I needed to find out what it took to run a comedy club stuff. So I quit my job. I went bankrupt and wrote off $2,800, which was stupid. I had 7 years of bad credit by writing off $2,800, but I had no debt at that point. Drove back to LA and I talked to club owners. I talked to club managers. I talked to comics, came back to Sacramento, wheeled and dealed. I had no money. So I got a banquet room where I made a deal with the restaurant. They got the food and the drink. I got the banquet room, right? So I had no overhead. I didn't have any employees. I would set up my room, my nightclub. I would greet the people, take the money, seat them. Then I emceed the show. And then after the show, I'd take down my comedy club. I did that every day for over a year, right? So it was a lot of hard work, and I lost my ass financially for over 6 months. But eventually it turned around and started making money, so that 2 years later, I was able to actually lease my own space and open a Class A, one of the best comedy clubs in the country. But the reason I shared that story, Jackson, is that I didn't have, a silver spoon. I just didn't go in and buy what I needed. I had to make it happen. I had to be creative to get the space, and I had to learn about the industry myself. It was all seat of the pants.
Yeah, there's just something about people who are willing to go that extra mile to get stuff done, and I definitely commend you for being able to succeed and fail. Some people, once they fail, they think, oh, well, I just wasn't meant to do this. They think no is the end solution, but really it's just a speed bump in your road to success.
Yeah. I mean, some people, to be honest, think I'm crazy. And it has there's been good times and bad times, but you're right. When you fail, you just have to get up, shake yourself off, and go to the next thing, or learn from your mistake. That's one thing that's important. If you do make a mistake, just learn from it. If you start repeating mistakes, that's on you.
Yeah. So what is something that you feel like people should probably know about either entrepreneurship or the comedy industry that they probably don't know?
Well, in the entrepreneurship, that you don't have to know it all to do it. People think, oh, I have to be an expert to go do it. It's like a musician. You don't have to play like Jimi Hendrix to still be a successful musician, right? There's a lot of levels in between. So you should knock out some of those early levels on your own. It's the same in starting a business. Do what you can, learn from others, and jump into it. And then the rest will come to you with time. So the analogy for comedy is, if you want to get into comedy, start writing down what you think is funny, get into as many open mics as you can. You're going to be working for free for a while, but hey, it's fun. You're going to learn something about yourself. I try to tell everybody, whether you want to be a stand-up comic or not, you should get on stage once or twice, because it's such a great learning tool. But uh, I think being consistent and being persistent work in both theater and stand-up comedy and for business and entrepreneurship. You have to be consistent and keep just going at it. And then you have to be persistent. You can't stop when things get in your way. You have to just keep going.
Well, Scott, it's about time to wrap it up. If you could just give everybody all your info and how they can reach you and see the content that you help produce.
Oh, well, thank you. I would be happy to do that. And I really appreciate not only being on your show, you're a talented young guy. I've listened to a couple of your shows and you're doing a great job. And I know your audience appreciates your content. For my audience, I have a podcast called Stand Up Comedy, your host and MC. It's available on all directories. I just put out a little over my 100th episode, and I've had a little over 50,000 downloads. So it's doing pretty good. But it's all about stand-up comedy. It's either interviews with professional comics or actual live shows that I recorded when I was doing TV, radio, and my stage shows. And then if you're interested in learning more, my website, scottscomedystuff.com. That's really difficult, isn't it? scottscomedystuff.com. If you get a chance, check it out. And there's my online comedy course. There's some video entertainment of young comics, and more access to my website. And then my book, 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic, is available on Amazon. It's less than $20. It's a great opportunity to not only see pictures of me with famous celebrities, but you also get a chance to learn something about yourself. And all these things give everybody an opportunity to learn more about themselves and maybe the comedy entertainment. And that's good, right?
That's awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much again for all the info you gave us and all the insight. It was truly a blessing to have you on, man.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it myself.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.